to the Yamhill County Leaders Talk. I'm looking at a list of business, kind of business news and public health and safety news. And I'd love to get started. Maybe what we'll do is get started by asking Senator Roblan to join us and tell the community what you'd like to hear, or what you'd like them to hear. Or Senator Roblan, are you?
Got me now? Sorry
Okay,
about that.
fantastic.
I guess what I would say is there are a lot of people, bipartisan work being done on a regular basis. I'm on about 10 different calls regularly, including 2 work groups for the governor on economic development at the state level. And we had a subgroup that worked on issues regarding loans for commercial buildings, which was a lot more complex than I had understood, but now I have a little better understanding of what we can and cannot do. But there is a lot of people working on those things. I have direct conversations daily with my ranking member of the Joint Committee, Senator Boquist, so we keep in touch fairly regularly. And I have meetings with Chehalem County. I have meetings just got off one with Coos, Jochimsen, and Douglas counties about an hour and a half ago. So we're trying to keep as much information as we can going and flowing. We are having a meeting later this week, actually tomorrow, with the 4 caucus leaders and the 4 members of the Joint Committee, the 2 of us who are chairs and the 2 ranking Republican, Representative Stark and Representative Boquist, will be meeting with the governor tomorrow to talk about the recommendations that we've made and how they're moving forward. We're getting a lot of information about the implementation of the federal programs and how it's coming. They tell us the money will be here before the 24th. As many people know, a number of the caucus members, other members, have been having conversations about rural hospitals and making sure that they are getting taken care of. Our clinics are in the same shape in rural areas. So there's a lot happening. I have to commend the governor's office personally, because they have taken steps, and we look like we have fared better than almost all of the others that started getting cases when we did. So, and I guess the big kudo goes out to local residents and Oregonians all over the state who have done the social distancing stuff better than most places. We did get a panic a week and a half ago on the weekend in the south and the north coast when all of the Washington people came down for spring break, which created a lot of issues on the coast and ended up closing all the parks quicker than we had planned on it, ended up closing all of the waysides along the coast so that we don't get lots of people coming to visit, because we love them to visit when everything's good. It's not a good time to visit right now. So I guess those are the big things that I would tell you. I'm certainly open for questions if people have them, and look forward to any input you have, and I will take it back if we have our Joint Committee meet again. But because of that Joint Committee, we have a lot of input from cities and counties in particular regarding land use decision making and budgeting and all of those things. So be assured those conversations are going on, and we're trying to figure it out. The same is true with courts and figuring out timelines for courts. All of those conversations are happening at the highest levels, trying to make sure that we do it the right way and find out whether or not the executive power given by the emergency and the governor is enough to do that. So we will continue to do that. We know that the governor can, in fact, move money around from agency to agency to try to resolve some of the problems. And then we as the legislature will have to balance it up at the end of this biennium, which comes up after the next session starts. So a lot of work ahead. Our economy, and we haven't had a lot of economic forecasts yet. We have one coming up in May. That's going to be a big determining factor. The other thing we want to make sure we don't do is put out scarce state resources before we know what the federal is doing, because we find out all the time that if we've already spent it, they aren't going to reimburse it. And we have to make sure that we make every dollar count in this particular thing. For, as you know, the state has to have a balanced budget, not true of the federal government, and we've got to be careful with the resources. And I warn people, it looked like we had a really good balance at the end of this biennium with about $1.4 billion in the bank. That was imaginary money. That depended on a forecast that was continuing to grow, and we do not have that forecast anymore. We don't know what the actual numbers are. We are a little bit better situated for next year because of the resources we put aside in our two big rainy day funds that will be possible to get a hold of in the next general session. So that may help us through this portion, and that I guess that's the gist of what I would say to begin with. That open to any questions, and know we're continuing to have conversations about keeping businesses alive, which is a biggie. So if I can answer more questions, or if you have things you would like me to take with me to my meetings, I would be glad to entertain it. And I was looking forward to listening to all of the things the county has and needs in order to try to help. I know that many of the counties are now operating under emergency command at the county level. I know in Coos County that is happening, and so the county is, all of the hospitals and everybody are working together through the county now and the county health department to make sure resources are directed appropriately. So I don't know if that's happening at each county, but we also are hearing from the state and their emergency control that seems to be getting in line now. That's pretty much it. We got early into this with the committee. Most of the things that we came up with as being important, either the governor has taken care of and or the federal government is planning on taking care of. So that means that we were thinking about the right things. We just got out ahead of everybody. So that's where we're at.
Thank you very much, Senator. Questions from panelists? And you can unmute yourself if you have a question. Anybody?
I guess I was clear enough. Thanks.
It looks like there's a question from Gioia Goodrum at the McMinnville Chamber.
Okay.
Is that correct?
I'm just wondering, I'm sorry, Senator Roblan, did you talk about whether there would be a special session coming up? I apologize, I was distracted by phone calls.
I did not. I will talk about that just briefly. Right now, there is not one planned. The question is whether or not the governor has enough executive powers that she doesn't really need us to come in and that she can shift around money. If there are identified things, and that's what our meeting is about tomorrow, that we're going to have with all the leadership, including the governor. If there are things that have to have a fix, if there's money that we have to give authorization to spend, if there are things that we have determined cannot be done with executive order, then there is a possibility of one. I would say we're probably not looking at that. I just can't make a guess as to when. I know that the big thing they want to figure out is what is the economy doing, what's the expectation in the future, because we need to be careful with what we spend, given the free fall that right now is happening with respect to income tax coming in. So we really haven't decided. There are two ways we can do a special session. One is a special emergency session. Senator Boquist and Representative Cowan actually put that in the statute, and then in the Constitution is Article 10. It allows us to meet. It was considered because of the tsunami idea of the big subduction zone earthquake. We don't need to have quorums. We don't need to have other stuff. The governor can call it. It only lasts for 31 days because we're thinking of a single event as opposed to this rolling thing. So it has to be used very sparingly. And you can only deal with things in that special session that are directly related to the reason for calling the special session. So it's a rare thing. We have never used it before. It's one that is there. The other regular special session, we have to have quorums and people have to show up. So that means you would have a minimum of 40 House members and 20 senators that have to show up in person. And we have to figure out the social distancing so we don't get sick when they come in. So that the plans are being developed for that so that we can be ready when it happens. But right now there has not been a definitive date or time set up for a special session.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good question, Gioia. There was one that was on my list as well. One question that I wanted to send to the senator is this is Casey Kulla, which maybe some of the economic folks who are on the call will also have the answer to. But how is the employment department handling unemployment claims at this point? Do you have a better sense than other people?
We've had a lot of conversations. They've doubled or tripled their actual people. Other agencies are sending people. They're training them up to try to be able to have as many people as they can on phone lines. We have a very similar to a whole bunch of the other states around the nation. It's a COBOL system. So anybody who was in college back when I was in the 70s understands COBOL, because that was the language we were being taught at the time. So it's very arcane and old. And so it has failed a few times. I was listening to the conversation on Connecticut. They are also on that same COBOL system. They have brought in COBOL engineers to help them. They've broken down at least 3 times. They've got 20 times their average, their highest level of people coming in that they've ever had. So it's a nationwide problem. It's something we'll have to make some time to fix in the future. In fact, we were trying to figure out how could we give the first week instead of the waiting week, but that would have taken longer than the waiting weeks to get it fixed in the old system. So we recognize that you always get the full amount of money, including that waiting week, as time goes on. We're trying to figure out how do we get money from the federal government and get it out as quickly as we possibly can. So that's our goal right now. I know it's behind, and we're having a lot of conversations about if there's ways to fix that, but it's overwhelmed right now.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Senator. Questions?
Yes, Commissioner. Senator, this is Mary Starrett, Yamhill County Commissioner. Thank you for your information. I just wanted a clarification. So when you mentioned that the governor might, by executive order, be able to move around some money, would that be with the direction and with input from the COVID group or individual legislators, or some of the information that counties had sent in terms of suggestions on what to do for immediate relief?
The answer is yes. That he is taking a lot of that information and advice from people. I know that Republican caucus has had a long talk with her last night and the other day. So there are direct input. She is being made available, plus her staff, to get that input before she makes any of those decisions. And again, keeping in line, when do they have to be made is another part of those conversations. So they are doing an analysis of all of the resources that are available in the state right now. And I think they will cautiously make those decisions based on information that comes in, including the stuff that's coming in from local governments, hospital systems, all of the different groups. So I feel very confident that they are gathering that data before they make any decisions. But the question is, can she and does she have the executive power? And I know that there are a lot of people who are checking that out. And I think that the legislative branches, fiscal people, are working with the governor's office to make sure that we have some agreements between those people about making the right decisions. So I think they're getting a lot of that input. And again, that's part of the reason we're having the meeting tomorrow with all of the leadership in the caucuses.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner, did that get your answer? Or do you have follow-up?
Well, no, I mean, I just wanted to make sure that there was going to be, having the executive power to do something is one thing, but I'm just wondering to what degree there would be input, not just, okay, here's, we've all sent various suggestions for quite a while, but just what will the legislators have in terms of direct impact on any decisions?
I think we're going to have to work through our leadership and all 4 of the caucuses to make sure that those voices are heard. And I know the caucuses are meeting on a regular basis to have those conversations. I will tell you that one of the requirements for any kind of special session will be that the 4 leaders, the Speaker, the President, the Republican minorities in the House and the Senate, all have to get on the same page and agree with what it is that we're going to go in for before we'll ever go. Because special sessions without agreements ahead of time are really difficult things to manage, and we've had problems in that in the past, and we don't need that in an emergency like we have right now. So I think we're being cautious and careful, not get ourselves in too big a hole that we can't get out of it when we come out of this. Yes. So there will be input. We'll have to wait and see how much we get to have over time. But I appreciate the fact that they have involved a few of us all the time, and the fact that a number of us are keeping in communication at least 2 or 3 times a day has been important. And I have appreciated my relationship with Senator Boquist a lot with regard to that.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Yeah.
Yep.
Senator, me too. I've really appreciated the communications I've gotten from Senator Boquist. And I'm so glad that in Yamhill County, I'm thinking a little bit provincially, but I'm so glad we have both Senator Boquist and Senator Roblan on the council of the committee. So thank you for that. Are there other questions for Senator Roblan? Senator Roblan, I have one more for you, which is, would you be willing to do a kind of a high level summary of the recommendations that your committee has?
It was like 12 pages. Let me see.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
So I have to get that ready for tomorrow, but I really don't have it in mind.
Okay.
Let me see. Maybe later in the call, I'll come back and have that ready for you, because I have to get my book in front of me that I put on in a folder, because I was reading it over earlier, but I didn't get through it.
Okay.
Okay.
That sounds wonderful. Does that sound good for everybody else? Okay. Great. Thank you, Senator Roblan. Unless there are any more questions, I'm going to move on to Representative Gomberg and Representative Post for their updates to their constituents. It looks like Representative Gomberg has unmuted himself first. So,
first person to the button gets to speak, Bill. Thanks, everybody. A couple of quick points I wanted to go over, and you've heard a lot of this information from Senator Roblan. The situation at the Employment Division. Let me make sure everybody understands the context there. A month ago, they were getting about 4,000 claims a week. Last week, they got 100,000 claims. Now, they have increased staff, doubled it, and working on tripling it. They've increased their hours, but I'm continuing to hear from people that they call and call and call and can't get through. And that there are ongoing concerns there. I'm hearing that. The Employment Division's hearing it. I understand the frustration levels are there, and it's simply a volume problem. So I encourage people to be persistent. I encourage them to be patient, but also if they have unique problems, they should reach out to their legislators. I wanted to talk about unemployment from the employer's perspective, and I know there's some chamber managers online. One of the concerns that we have is that if you lay people off, it affects the future payments that you need to make, payroll taxes that go into the unemployment trust fund. And we might want to make sure that if you are required to shut down and you're required to lay people off, that it doesn't unnaturally affect your future payments going forward. That's a serious concern. The governor's office has said to us that that because the formula looks at the long run, that those abnormalities will smooth out and it should not have an effect on your long-term payments. But I'm hearing from business owners that are receiving letters from the Employment Division saying something very different. And I have reached out to the governor's office to get some clarity on that point, making sure that this situation doesn't cost small businesses more money going down the road. There's some city officials and city managers listening in. I'm hearing the message that we're concerned about budgets, budget deadlines, and about the uncertainties in putting your current budgets together. And I'm trying to get some clarity on whether we have the potential to push back those budget writing deadlines. That's an issue of concern. I want to make sure that you know we're hearing that. And finally, the question was asked about special sessions. And we're waiting to hear news on that. But I want to remind you that in the absence of a special session, we have the opportunity for the governor to take action. We also have the opportunity for the emergency board to gather. The emergency board is a group of senators and representatives that have a fund that they can apply during the interim. That fund had the amount of $75 million in it The emergency board has already met once and allocated about 25 million, but there's still $50 million in that account. So the emergency board is taking a look at whether there are some short-term needs that need immediate funding and whether they should gather to fund those in the absence of a special session. Wanted to cover those three topics real quickly for you. I yield the balance of my time to Representative Post.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Post.
David, thank you. And I see Shannon has a question there, and I think that's a great question that probably you could answer better, David, than I could. Are there any updates to the language of the unemployment applications that specifically denote COVID-19 claims?
And I have not heard anything specifically on that. I know the conversations are moving forward. Part of the problem is that we're getting changing definitions from the federal government on an almost daily basis. And so the employment division is struggling to keep up with the claims, but also struggling to keep up with the changes. And do we have updates to the applications? I'm not hearing anything about that right now, but we might hear about it before the day is over.
Thank you, Representative. One of the reasons, well, two reasons that I asked, the claim filing is really confusing still for contractors, gig workers, and self-employed. And it would also give us a tracking component after the crisis is managed to see which of these claims were specifically linked to COVID-19 issues, so that we might do some sort of an adjustment to the unemployment benefits insurance process. So
well, you're absolutely right. Those are examples of some of the new federal changes benefiting sole proprietors, contractors, and gig workers. And as I said, we're struggling to keep up with those changes and have it reflected in our forms and our procedures.
Okay, then really,
Thank you.
I don't have a whole lot more to add that Senator Roblan and Rep. Gomberg haven't already covered. I had on my list number one, unemployment calls. If there was one dominating topic that's been coming to my office, it's unemployment. I can't get a hold of them. I've made 300 calls. I called for the last 6 days, on and on and on and on and on. I think I said this last week at the end, and David, you probably know this as well as I do, that it always disturbs me that it takes a call from the representative or the senator's office before things start rolling. And I've had so many constituents that have called in the last week or so, especially even today, I can't get through, and we make an email or a call, and all of a sudden, magically, they get a call. I hate to be that way, but it is what's happening. So I am strongly urging, if you're in, I don't care if you're in my district or not in my district, but if you're in my district and you're having a problem getting through to the unemployment office, would you please email my office and let us make a call for you? The second, if there was two topics that are 1 and 1A, but not quite that close, but the second closest is since the decision, the order to on renters, I've been hearing from landlords. Well, what am I going to do? I own 3 houses in Kaiser, and this is my investment for my retirement. And my renters have told me they're not going to pay because they don't have to now. And I say, I don't know. So that's been the next thing that we've been working on, and we've been contacting. And the governor's office has been really good about getting back to us. Lana is fantastic about getting back to us. But that's been a big one, is all these, not the corporation from California that owns the big apartment complex over there, but Bob and Sally and Joe that own 3 trailers right behind me, as a matter of fact, or own a house right over there. And they're concerned about how do they pay their mortgage. So we've been contacting the governor's office on that, as well as our federal delegation on that. And as of right now, I don't have a specific answer to give, but that's been the number 2 for sure topic that I received at my state email. And otherwise, everybody else has covered what I was going to say.
Okay. Questions for Representative Post? Okay, great. Thank you very much to both of the representatives for joining us again today. And I'd like to go to county commissioners if we can, and then to mayors, and then we'll do economic development unless somebody really needs to jump in right now. So Commissioner Starrett, what do you have to, that you'd like to tell constituents and people on the call?
What do you have to say for yourself, Commissioner Starrett? Is that it? Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, I'm just, lately I've just been trying to dig around and get some numbers. I think that people are hearing so many numbers out there, and unless and until we can get some fidelity to what the actual stats are and what's being reported. I know that Senator Boquist has had a concern about OHA numbers, and we have too. So what I've been trying to find out is how many, for instance, how many hospitalizations do we have in Yamhill County? Well, we have 2. At this particular point, I was trying to see, we've heard all these concerns about capacity. So what numbers of ICU beds, non-ICU beds, pediatric ICU beds, that type of thing. What do we have and what are we experiencing? So at this juncture, it doesn't look like we're in any way our capacity that we're overloaded, or that we have any projections that are even pointing to that. Although if you look at what came out today from the same organization at University of Washington that was projecting that we'd have about 230 at the top, 1,000 hospitalizations. That hasn't come anywhere close to that. So they're making projections that the state of Oregon will see a peak in 2 weeks, and that we'll have deaths and hospitalizations, which are really far and away more than what we're seeing now. So I'm just putting numbers out there. The CDC has issued new guidelines in terms of how to actually code a death. And so I actually posted that. They've got a new way. Basically, anything that has either an assumption of a COVID involvement is being coded as a COVID death. So I think we have to keep those numbers and take those into consideration. So that to me is just, where are we capacity-wise, and what are we looking at in the next couple of weeks? I've just been digging around at those numbers.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for looking at those. I'm always delighted how the 3, I'll just put this out, the 3 commissioners who are on this call are thinking about different things, and they're all, I think, very, very important. Commissioner Olson, or first, are there questions for Commissioner Starrett? Okay, great. Commissioner Olson, what would you like to tell folks today?
Well, a couple things, Casey. Yeah, I think that's important. Is first of all, I'd like to thank Representative Gomberg and Post and Senator Roblan, and especially Senator Boquist for the work they've done. It's been very instrumental. And anybody elected official that's gotten the information, some of the information that Senator Boquist puts out, I've did some of the research, the same research he did, and it seems like OHA does not have accurate numbers from report to report. They just don't jive with other reports we see. And I don't know why that is, but it just seems to be the way it is. And then I feel a lot of times that, and Mary talked about the number of hospitalizations and capacity and everything, that the reason why we're not tracking that now, or why we're not sending that information, is really disheartening to me. The other thing is, for anybody that gets the information from Senator Boquist, might have seen the other day that he put out the information, a new Excel spreadsheet on the PPE equipment, and what is to year to date, what's been put out per county with a total at the end. And I was really surprised that that information wasn't made available to anybody to look at. And I don't know where it'd be, but it's not made for anybody to look at. And I'm not even so sure where Senator Boquist got it. But it does show, one thing that it really did show is that 5 counties in the state of Oregon, mostly the frontier type counties with the exclusion of Coos County, basically have not gotten any PPE equipment at all, because they've had very few cases. So I thought that was interesting. But I am concerned that it seems like the governor, through a lot of the executive orders which she does, and the way that they're being interpreted, is there for a lot of the small frontier counties, the Malheur counties and the Harney counties and the Gilliam counties. They're more pointed towards the west side of the Cascades, when I think they're just as important for the small counties. So I did have a question, though. I put it on chat for Representative Gomberg and Representative Post and potentially Senator Roblan, if he's still on. Are the employment office unemployment call-in call centers, are they available 24 hours a day? And if not, why? And if they had even a skeleton crew or a minor crew that operated from 6 at night till 6 in the morning, I think that would alleviate a lot of that thing. Just don't have, they're training a lot of people, but they don't have the phone lines either. So that was just a question for any of the representatives or the senator that wants to answer it.
Well, it's an excellent question. I know that we've expanded to Saturday hours. I don't know about evening hours, and actually I did submit an inquiry earlier today trying to get some information on whether hours that the unemployment office is operating have changed. The advice that we are being given and sharing is that people should start by going online and filling out their applications online, and that once those applications are received, that their claim will be processed. So people should start on the internet, not on the phones, but I'm trying to find out if there are additional hours available. I know that you can call after hours and you get into the system, but after you go through a number of voice prompts, you're eventually routed to a desk and you're told nobody's at that desk because it's after hours. So I'm trying to find out if we're looking at changing those hours. Bill, do you have anything in addition to that?
One thing, additional thing I have in it to that is that I've talked to people who have done the application online, got through the application online. If they need help with the application, they can't get it. But once they get the application online, they're told it can't, there's a message, something that comes up that can't be processed, that a final phone call is required. And that's where they're getting caught up, is in that final phone call, because nobody's answering the phone.
Okay. Representatives, do you have any last thoughts on that question? Or Senator? Okay.
The hours they. Oh, my understanding is they are looking at expanding the daytime hours. They weren't going to go 24, but I had heard that the conversation was happening. I don't know if it happened yet. So Gomberg's probably got the best, latest information.
Thanks, Senator.
Great, thank you. Good question. Mayor Wytoski, can you give us you sounded like you were interested in giving us a specific update, so.
Sorry, I was hollering for my husband to come get the baby, because of course she walked in right when you said my name and was mommy up. So
I was like, what?
I know, I'm like, Chris, come get the baby. So sorry about that. I have a couple things. You know, Dayton had a regularly scheduled city council meeting last night. We did it with some technology. So we just had myself and our city recorder in our chambers, and one guest from the public, who we tried to keep, obviously, thank you, at several feet from our area. I had the rest of the council on a call. We actually did have full attendance. So we were able to conduct our regular business. Unfortunately, what we did do was recognize that we were not going to have our regular events coming on. So we are not yet doing anything about Old Timers, our big festival. That is not until the end of July. And so for now, we're just going to be hopeful moving forward, and put plans into place. So what I hope, of course, is that you know, Oregon will be under a period where we can have some more normalized social interaction, and that people will probably be very hungry for that at that point, and that it'll be maybe the biggest and best Old Timers festival we have, with a really great turnout as people are really ready to come together. So we'll see how that goes. We also discussed you know, trying to go kind of big on National Night Out and things like that. We're, of course, continuing our closures of our parks, our library, our facilities. One thing I do want to point out, we had started an economic program to help encourage our residents to buy food takeout at our restaurants, and we did have 6% of our residents with a utility bill reduction. So that's pretty good considering they had a week to turn receipts in. So I really hope to see that go up a lot. And just to remind you, if you don't know, what we're offering is $15 off of their water bill for $25 in receipts spent at downtown businesses. And they can do 3 of those a month, so they can actually cut their utility bill about in half with $75 spent at those businesses. So I'm hoping we get well over the 10% for this month. I really think we will. It's been very well received. Lots of positive feedback from both our residents who love their water bill going down and our businesses who are seeing a lot of folks come in for that curbside pickup. A big concern, of course, I know, I really appreciate our legislators acknowledging the municipal concerns for budget law. I think that extends also to public meetings law, especially where budgets are concerned. You know, we did, like I said, carry out a city council meeting last night. It actually went pretty smoothly. We were able to get everybody heard, had a little bit of discussion and debate. My concern is if we add our full budget committee, we're talking about, of course, a doubling plus staff. We're talking about 16, 18 people on a phone line trying to have budget discussion. That's going to be hard. That's going to be hard if that's the city's only options for preparing budgets. And I know the League of Oregon Cities is talking about cities are going to lose authority and essentially stop acting legally July 1 if we don't have budgets passed. So I really do hope that the governor's team or the legislators are looking at that really closely to see what can be done, whether that's a change in public meetings law so that we're able to facilitate the distance meetings a little bit more easily, or if that's a change in deadline so that we're able to wait until we can really gather committees and have the rigorous types of discussions expected for municipal budget building. Casey asked me, sorry, Commissioner Kulla had asked me to also comment a little bit. I've been following really closely all the public health advisories. So, you know, last week I put out a call to our area seamstresses to start sewing masks for our fire department. It actually, they of course are wearing N95s on their calls as they respond, but what they wanted was masks to give to folks in a home that they were entering. So I have, you know, a few people I've chatted with. I delivered another bag last night, and I think that they have a few hundred of those either in hand or on the way this week. And the CDC, it has updated their guidance and asked people to start wearing masks out in public. And just for clarity, especially for people in the public or who might watch this video a little bit later, yes, we all realize that homemade cotton masks are not going to stop the virus from transmission, but it reduces what's passed, and so you know, it protects me a little, it protects you a little. If we both wear a mask, then we're both protected a little bit more. So that's kind of the idea behind that. I know the CDC is also hoping to warn people that those masks, because they are not 100%, you know, should not provide a false sense of safety. So just because you're wearing a mask does not mean you can have a barbecue, go to your friend's house, have a birthday party, you know, and engage in leisure activities. Yet we're just not there. To Commissioner Starrett's point, I am also really, really hopeful about the numbers that we're seeing, especially those hospitalizations, which Oregon seems to have acted a little bit earlier on our kind of continuum of viral infections. Fortunately, because we acted so closely to Washington and California, which were ahead of us infections, and in that timeline, I really hope that we've, you know, been able to save some lives, and I really hope to see those infection rates stay down. You know, I really hope that people see those numbers. I think that OHSU had reported a total of like 6 hospitalizations yesterday. I know there's just a couple in you know, in other counties. I hope that what we do when we see that data is say what we're doing is working. It's saving people. It's keeping people from transmitting the virus. It's keeping most vulnerable people from getting access, and continue to do what we're doing, because it does seem to be really effective. And I think we see that in those lower transmission numbers, especially compared to other states that have not observed those orders as early. So I'd really encourage other cities, others in leadership to start talking to seamstresses and encourage the creation of those masks, whether they're given away, bartered, sold, whatever. I think it was great that our fire department asked for those before it was those CDC recommendations so that they could start getting those into homes on responses. And then, of course, they have them for ongoing use. So now if they go out to the grocery store, they do have a mask they can take with them. And that's really great. I know I've been talking long enough and I've kind of used my time, but I do want to put one more thing out to the state legislators, especially, and that is my concern about education. I teach high school government and economics at Dayton High School, and I'm sure not super impressed with some of the leadership that we're getting from ODE and the guidance that we're getting from ODE. I don't know if you've all read the 30-page directive for how to continue education from a distance. Dayton is actually probably a lot better off than a lot of districts. We've been one-to-one on devices for at least 3 years. We've engaged with Google Classroom, lots of online learning opportunities. And I teach only seniors, which means they have a higher absentee rate. I'm sure that'll shock you all. The seniors aren't super great at coming to school. And so I make sure that I back up lectures and lessons online. And so we're really accustomed to that. However, in a classroom environment, my kids who are hungry, I can feed them before I teach them. And my kids who are having a mental health crisis, I can refer them to a counselor to talk to and then have them come back later and get a lesson. And my kids who are really tired because they had an intoxicated parent keep them up all night. We have places for them to go rest for a bit. We can't offer anything in terms of equity. So ODE is saying, just go ahead and teach these lessons. And my concern is, number one, for my kids. It's my students. We are going out. I mean, teachers, my district is not alone in this, but I have delivered birthday presents and cards and left them on porches for kids because their mental health is significantly more important than their academic progress. And so we're continuing to do things like that. But it's going to be really hard for me to tell them how important it is for them to work on their business plan and come up with an appropriate financial model in their econ class when they're scared. Or when they're hungry, when they're experiencing trauma, runaways are up. We've got all this stuff going on, and I sort of am not sort of. I'm pretty darn frustrated to hear from the state. Just do your best, because what that means to me is go ahead and leave those kids behind. And it's not just those kids from trauma, it's kids who have English as a second language in their household, it's kids who have disabilities, it's our most vulnerable kids, and essentially we're saying, we understand that you can't really reach them, do your best. So one, my concern is for those kids. Two, my concern is for liability. I think ODE is shifting that liability to districts who are going to get sued for not correctly accommodating, for not meeting IEPs, for not properly doing outreach with these kids based on a directive where they didn't really have a choice. And my third concern is listening to the dang teachers in this, because ODE issued that directive simultaneously to all the teacher unions and the media, providing no opportunity for classroom teachers to say, here's the problems we would anticipate on the ground. And that is very, very concerning, that top-down level. I'm going to not get super fired up about it, but it's really hard to not have teachers better heard in that process so that we can explain it. I can talk about anecdotes of, my homeless students that we're having to go do food drops because they don't have family supports, and I can't give them econ homework. I can't hold them to that standard when they're scared and hungry. And I'll leave it with that. Thanks.
Thank you. This is, yeah. When I see encouraged to, let's see, am I muted? No.
You're not muted. We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. When I see the phrase "you're encouraged to comply but not mandated," I have a better sense of what that actually means for people's lives. So thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah.
Representative Pelosi.
Representative, yeah.
Unmuted, yeah.
Just for a moment, Mayor, because I'm married to an educator, and she's sitting over there in the next room doing this, what we're doing with other people.
Yep.
I sent an email to Colt Gill yesterday. What I'm concerned about is, what are the metrics for returning to school? because the door's not been closed. If I understand right, if I read everything
Yeah.
right, the door's not been closed. It was, we might not continue this school year. That sounds to me like we might be able to. What is the metrics? Is it no more deaths for 2 weeks? No more hospitalizations for 2 weeks? What is the metrics? And I can't get an answer. It was, thank you, Rep. Post, for sending me that question. Have a great day. And so I share your frustration. We've got a wild idea that we've been kicking around, and that is, let's start with high school, middle school to elementary school. What if on April 29th, because we've talked about through April 28th, what if on April 29th, teachers went back, began their preparations in their classrooms and other things, and then on May 4th, let's say the seniors return on Monday, only the seniors at every high school, and they take up the space of the entire school. Okay, so you spread them out all over the entire school. And then Tuesday, the juniors, Wednesday, right on down the list. 1 day a week until we get past maybe the next metric of danger zone, whatever you want to call it. And we could do that in middle school, and we could really do it in elementary school. All the first graders are in the whole school. Then all the second graders, 5 days a week. So, because I keep saying, wouldn't it be great to have 1/4 of a quarter rather than 0/4 of a quarter? It's just an idea I have. And I'm kind of waiting for somebody to respond, but I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind on the seniors is that they are done at the end of May with their hours at most Oregon high schools. So they might only return for about 3 weeks, but so you're talking about 3 days, 1 day a week. They would maybe have 3 days. Now I would take 3 days. I have some kids that I think would really benefit from having 3 days. I also recognize some others would probably be extraordinarily stressed with not understanding what their expectations are, if those are the days. I think something I'm hearing from my students is they essentially want us either back in school or to call it, because what they want is a clear directive of what the expectations are from now until the end of our school year. And additionally, of course, something I'm getting from my seniors, and I don't know the answer to this, and maybe you do, is, are institutions of higher education involved in these talks? Because I'm hearing a lot about discussions to either reduce credits, change the pass, no pass, look at these different structures to get seniors done and have an Oregon diploma still granted. My concern is, are we then going to give a diploma that they can't take to a college? So I'm wondering if higher ed is involved in this and going to, I would expect, obviously, grace, if not a policy change, maybe grace. But I'm curious if you have any insight into that.
If we can move on, I just want to make sure that Abisha Stone gets to include her updates before she has to go to another call. But I'd also like to remind folks that if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. And that'll be in the little corner where it says mute, unmute. Okay, thank you. Abisha.
Hi there, thank you. And again, thank you to Kulla and Mayor Wytoski for setting up the call. And I just have to say, Mayor, thank you so much for being an educator who cares the way that you do. As a mother of a child with special needs, I definitely understand the difficulty involved with a transition like this. And I'm so, so grateful. I feel blessed to have educators like you who care so much in our region. So thank you. Okay, so a few quick updates. I wanted to share that there have been a few different immediate relief, immediate impact grant sort of programs that have been released in our region, and also kind of share what we're hearing across the board about the fact that these programs are just being inundated as soon as they open. So SAFE Corporation opened a grant program just this week, and they had a $10 million grant program that was available for workplace safety around COVID-19. So businesses that needed to change process, that needed equipment to keep their employees safe. And they had such an overwhelming impact, it completely shut down their system and they stopped taking applications. They're currently working with 1,300 businesses right now to implement that grant program. We saw the same thing happen with Willamette Workforce Partnership. They have a layoff aversion grant that they issued. They cover a 4-county area, and of course they're our workforce board. They basically blew through their grants within 10 minutes of being open. It was a first come, first serve scenario. And we're hopeful that they get refunded for another program, again, that being a layoff aversion sort of a grant that goes directly to businesses. Marion County just opened, or they are opening a grant program, which Willamette Workforce Partnership is helping them administer. That program doesn't actually start taking applications until Thursday, but this morning there was an overwhelming response on Willamette Workforce Partnership's website that shut them down again. And that program doesn't even open until Thursday. We know the city of Newburgh is issuing a grant program, and I'll leave that to Shannon to talk more about. And Yamhill County, of course, is looking at an emergency immediate relief grant program for small businesses as well, which the Board of Commissioners will be reviewing a revised proposal for tomorrow. So just wanted to make sure folks were aware of at least some of those programs and also the overwhelming response. I'm getting a lot of feedback regarding unemployment department and system shutting down. I've had several businesses reach out to me with frustration around accessing SBA PPP loans, not being able to work with banks because they don't have existing debt with those banks, not getting responses, not getting calls back. Some of the companies that are large enough, I think, to be of interest to some of those banks for future partnerships are getting a better response than those that are smaller. And what I'm hearing is, you know, we're being penalized for not carrying debt with these companies, these banks who aren't even staffed well enough to handle the burden of administering these programs. And I think many of you have probably heard that same thing. I wanted to share that SEDCOR is hosting a webinar this Wednesday directed at Mid-Willamette Valley manufacturers. We have some speakers, someone from the state of Oregon. We have a speaker from the SBA program talking about these various different loan programs and access to them. We also have somebody who will be speaking from OMEP, Oregon Manufacturers Extension Partnership, regarding some of this kind of business-to-business work and tooling and gearing up that many of our manufacturers are doing in order to be able to serve emergency medical equipment, sort of a thing. So we're hosting that on Wednesday. It's at noon, and we've been sending that out. It's on our website. I would recommend that you share that with folks. We're trying to get more manufacturers than just agency partners on that call. We're limited to 100, and I think we might actually just buy a larger Zoom package to get more folks, because I think we have more than 100 who are trying to get on right now. We also are still having a lot of conversations at the county level regarding access to the revolving loan fund that Yamhill County has sitting with the Council of Governments. We're not the only county that has funds that are fairly aged and carry a high interest rate that's set by the Department of Commerce. We're working really hard to see what we can do to get that interest rate lowered. If there's anything that any of our local representatives can do to advance these conversations, it would be greatly appreciated. These are essentially funds that are not being used for what they were intended because the interest rate is so high that it is prohibitive, essentially, right, for these businesses to even access. If you have to go through the entire same rigmarole of federal process for qualifying for these loans, and then you have an interest rate close to 6%, it's just not the least bit attractive right now. I also wanted to say thank you and a big shout out to the city of Dayton for not just implementing the buy local, save on your water bill program, that's what I'm calling it, but for sharing the information. We did share that with the city of Newburgh, who just launched a similar program today, and I am actively trying to get every community who is the least bit willing to listen to me to consider a similar program. It's pretty cool. Really excited about it. So thank you for sharing that, Mayor. And I think that's probably it for me. So I do have to jump to another call. Thank you all very much for all the work that you're doing in the county.
Thank you very much, Abisha. I really appreciate it. She got a lot in there. I'd like to note that there is one comment from the Employment Department, courtesy of Representative Post. Representative Post, do you want to read that since you got it? And then we'll go to Stacey at Merkley's office.
Let me read it from my screen here. While we were talking, I sent an email over to the Employment Department, just hoping maybe they might reply. They replied. We have doubled the number and will continue to add more people to process claims. We are adding more workspaces and shifts as we add people to create safe social distancing work environments. We added a Saturday shift. We filed emergency rules to allow us to process COVID-19 related unemployment insurance claims. We are working through the detail with our federal partners to implement the federal changes as soon as possible. I did ask, is there any chance of going 24 hours? No answer yet.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I mean, you got it, so way to go. Stacey needs to go to another call, so I'd like to have her the opportunity to give us a federal update.
Thank you, Casey. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I just wanted to touch base real quick. The SBA is rolling out the Paycheck Protection Program, is going through money really fast. And as Abisha mentioned, it's been pretty bumpy since Friday. Banks are hitting their limits on lending capabilities. They've made a number of different determinations as far as who they'll loan to. As Abisha mentioned, some will only lend to current customers or customers who already have a loan, or all kinds of differing criteria. So it's shaping up to be harder than we anticipated for folks to find participating providers. The idea was to have banks administer the program because we didn't want to overwhelm SBA and thought it would be more efficient. But the need for assistance is quickly, overrunning our infrastructure to support it. So right now, Senator Merkley, the rest of the delegation, is trying to find solutions to try to smooth it out. We're trying to aggregate the experiences of Oregon businesses to try to identify ways to fix these issues. Our communications team is working on getting a portal up and running for businesses to quickly submit to us issues they're running into. So as soon as this gets up on Senator Merkley's page, we'll push it out. And then you've probably heard this week that the Department of Treasury is indicating they're going to need another at least $250 billion for the Paycheck Protection Program. We'll hear more about that this week. We're still pushing for PPE manufacturing. We want the Trump administration to use the Defense Production Act in a meaningful way. We keep hearing from the administration that they've invoked it, but nothing has been put into place. Lots of Oregon businesses like ADEC are stepping up to help, but they need support, resources, and orders placed. Merkley and Wyden also pushed the FDA to change their policy on blood donation recently, as there's an emergency need for blood. FDA's new policy lowers the 12-month deferral to a 3-month deferral for men who engage in sex with other men. And the FDA has also committed to gathering further evidence on pursuing blood donation policies based on individual risk factors rather than a blanket deferral. We've introduced the Coronavirus Immigrant Families Protection Act to try to make sure that vulnerable communities can access healthcare and other critical resources. It would ensure access to COVID-19 testing and treatment and other relief services provided in the relief legislation. It would also provide dedicated funding for CDC to conduct public outreach in multiple languages to hard-to-reach populations to ensure that vulnerable communities have access to COVID-19 relief measures and critical public health information. So that's what I would like to share before jumping off. If folks have questions, I'm happy to put my email on here, and feel free to email me anytime.
Questions for Stacey or things you'd like to send her as real quick thoughts to Merkley? Senator Merkley. Senator Roblan, do you have anything you want to share with Senator Merkley's field rep for our area?
They have been very good in contacting us, and we continue to have great relationships. I think our whole delegation is doing exceptional work. Bonamici is having a small business conference this afternoon sometime, but I have to be on another call, so I won't be able to make it there. DeFazio met with our county last week. So, and Merkley has been very, very good at getting us information that we send out in our newsletter on a regular basis. So I don't have any questions right now. I just appreciate the work that they're doing back in DC. So you can pass that on to Senator Merkley.
Great, thank you very much, both Stacey and Senator Roblan. And I must say that I get Senator Roblan's the newsletter that I think is part of the coronavirus response one, and it has everything I need to know. And I'm already getting it from other places, but I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah. Rosie's doing a great job for me.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Stacey. Gioia and Shannon, do you want to tag team?
Yes, please. I can get started really quickly. A lot of what I had to share has been covered already. So we do have the city of Newburgh did launch a rebate program modeled after Dayton's fantastic answer to a great community need. What it looks like for our community, it's almost identical. For every $25 spent, you get a $15 rebate. Those are in separate purchases. And this is up to $75 a month off your utility bill. So you have the opportunity to dine out 5 times a month to maximize that rebate. And so far our community loves it. So it was a good answer for the economic situation, but also the cultural psychological need of our community to find ways to reach out and support our small businesses. We also launched this morning a grant program, a small grant program. It's called the BERG Business Emergency Relief Grant, I believe, BERG. It's cute. Got to share the acronym. We have $100,000 available in 40 $2,500 chunks. This is available to businesses who have a Newburgh address, employ 15 or fewer full-time equivalency employees, have a current Newburgh business license in good standing, have operated for more than 1 year, and are locally owned and not a franchise. The purpose of this is actually rent or mortgage assistance. However, after the grant was opened up at 8 o'clock this morning, for these 40 grants, we now have over 100 applicants. So we're, again, overwhelmed. You start with a great idea, but the need is huge. It's colossal for our community. So we actually may even have to close the grant program a little earlier, just so we don't overwhelm the system that was set up to support it. So the need is out there. We have a committee of business leaders who will be reviewing the grants on Thursday. We're hoping to start the first financial awards as soon as Friday. And that would be check pickup organized at the city, of course, following all the social distancing protocols. So that was that. That was a quick drop in the bucket. We are really concerned about access to the PPP grants through the CARES Act. What I'm hearing is that if you are not already banking at one of the participating SBA 7A qualified banks, you don't have an opportunity to even apply for these loans. But even for people who do have accounts at these banks, if it's not a lucrative buy-in or if it's not a preferred account, they're not getting attention from our banks. And it would be easy maybe to put the blame on the banks, but I think the banks were set up to fail with the amazing workload that was transferred to them, the rigorous set of restrictions that they were placed under. They're already working with reduced staff as well. So we're asking them to move mountains with a fraction of their workforce under obligations that they're learning for the first time in some cases, but simply overwhelmed by. I have one anonymous anecdote to give you, and I've heard this story in several iterations over and over. We have a local business owner. He owns both a manufacturing company and a yoga studio. His bank is not a participating 7A bank. At Bank of America, he has all of his personal banking accounts. He was denied access to the PPP loan. At OnPoint, he has 2 business accounts, but no debt, so he was denied access to apply for the loans through that bank. At OSU Credit Union, he has a personal banking account and an auto loan. He was denied access to this loan application. So he has gone through 4 banks and cannot submit his application. So, boy, that's frustrating. It's discouraging, and I know it was meant to be encouraging. And again, I don't think it's just the banks. They have to prioritize as well. And we also need to be really mindful that we've already had so many applications just in the first few hours that outstrip the ability to fund these grants or loans, even just the loan capacity several times over, if qualified loans are considered. We also don't want to financially cripple our financial institutions by putting them under more pressure, nor do we want to compromise the security of our country to recover by authorizing several trillions of dollars again to fund these programs. So we need something that is equitable, it is efficient, it is accessible, fairly accessible by the businesses who need it most. It's been really discouraging. So actually the last 24 to 48 hours have been, at our chamber, we're mostly fielding these frustrated, scared, worried calls, emails, text messages from our business community. That being said, just a quick reminder, our chamber is transitioning all of our regularly scheduled events to virtual events. All of our services and events are open to all of our businesses, not only chamber members. So we're in this together as community partners. I'm happy to answer any questions. You can tell I'm really passionate about the inaccessibility resources to our community.
Do people have questions specifically for Shannon? And thank you for being an advocate for your businesses and your community. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's have Gioia do as much of an update and fill in gaps as you can, or maybe something new. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. Appreciate everybody, and got tons of notes. So I appreciate all of the comments from our representatives and our senators, and of course our commissioners and our mayors. It's been always a great conversation. So tomorrow I have two of our bankers coming to speak to our members about the PPP program. They are both offering it, and so I'm hoping that it will at least be able to inform people about those two banks and how they are running the program. The SBA continues to be an issue for some folks. I talked to one person today. She did her application, but she has not heard back yet. So there's also this lag of happening, but she's done everything she was told to do. She applied for everything she possibly could get, so she's waiting to find out what she will be getting. The McMinnville Economic Development Partnership, we call it the stable table. So it's MDA, MEDP, Visit McMinnville, the Chamber, and the city. There's 5 organizations. We are working on a grant we're actually going to be looking for money and writing a grant to get some cash to help our businesses to do a revolving loan kind of program. We are keeping our members updated, of course. We have our COVID page. We've got lots of Facebook and social media that we've been pushing information out there to our community and our members. Everything that we have is available to all of our members, to all of our business community. It's right there. If somebody outside of the members want to ask a question, we're happy to help. There is a company in Mac that is making 500 masks this week. They are not the N95s, but they're going to be making about 500 this week, 1,000 next week, and they're ramping up production. They also are making the visors and they're going to be making, I think, 10,000 of those. So Visit McMinnville is going to actually buy 1,000 of them, and because they didn't know how to get them out to the community, so we're going to buy them, and the stable table is going to try to get those out to the community because they're not the N95s, but they certainly are good for our community members. We are doing greeters virtually. We had one last Friday. It was a lot of fun. We had one bomb. Oh well, live and learn. So we're working on that. We'll do that again this Friday. I mentioned the call tomorrow for our PPP program with our bankers, and I'm also working on scheduling a meeting with Representative Noble to come and do a phone conversation with us as well. Turkey Rama, we don't know what we're going to do with that yet. It is the second week of July. Lemonade Day has been postponed to possibly August, and that's where we are right now with all of that. Thank you.
Questions for Gioia? Well, thank you, Gioia. And the one thing you and I communicated about was whether to invite one of the bankers on, and I would love to hear that. And I think that other people here would love to have their voice to share with the community as well.
Okay.
So thank you,
I'll make
especially.
that.
Okay.
No, go.
I was going to say, especially in light of Shannon's comments and the experiences of businesses in our community who don't seem to be able to access the PPP.
Right. I will make that happen. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Did I forget everybody? Anybody? Did I remember everybody? Is another way to put that. Senator Roblan, do you have any last comments since you're still on the line?
I could go through a short summary, but it would take another half hour. So I will just say that it's on the website in our OLIS. If you want to look at the whole report, it's about 11 pages. But basically, what we were doing is what we looked at was people need to eat, they need to have a place to stay, and they need to have some income to buy those things. So how could we go about doing that? And mostly what we did is put down residential evictions, commercial evictions. How do we stop that? What I found out since then is one of the conversations that we took place is that everything's a lot more complex. 30 to 40% of all the commercial loans that our commercial people have in the state of Oregon are not owned by banks. They are owned by hedge funds, public retirement funds and other kinds of things in a special arrangement where they're bundled, and getting them to accept the no payment is not working very well. So we've got a lot of work to do on there, and I know the governor's doing that. Food, we tried to figure out how could we get more money to OHA, DHS, TANF, and WIC so that those most vulnerable would have things, and to get some money to the food banks. For businesses, it worked pretty well. There was about $750,000 that Business Oregon had available early on, and they got it out fairly quickly. So the deal is, how do we get money out quickly to places? And we thought Business Oregon might be the best way to do that. This whole thing with the banks is causing us some consternation. So it continues to be a problem. Sick leave, we wanted to make sure that it was okay, that people had sick leave. The federal government said any company under 500, which is almost everything in Oregon, had to offer sick leave and family leave. So we were trying to figure out how do we help them meet that requirement without having to fire all their employees. So that was another conversation that came up. Healthcare access, we wanted to make sure that there was nothing out of network so that people just do what they needed to do, and trying to figure that. We had a proposal on physician assistants and nurses and making sure that they could work outside of their scope without liability and so on. There were just one of the things that came up with small hospitals in rural areas might make more beds so they could ramp up, but we didn't want that bed tax to affect them for the long term and change them from type A to type B hospitals. So we put a requirement in that would not happen, and they could make the beds, but it wouldn't affect them in the future. We had a whole bunch of conversations about other things that didn't make it into our approval. And so again, I would recommend people look it over. We're going to be spending a little bit of time tomorrow with the governor's office on anything that they haven't done to this point, and figuring out what the federal government's going to do. I do want to say thank you for the mayor in Dayton and the whole idea of education, which was my whole life before I got into this life, and it's been important to me. The issue that comes up, and I feel for our state agency, we have 197 school districts, and each one of them is unto their own boards and their own decision making. There is no two schools that necessarily have the same graduation requirements. There are so many different things that the state cannot do. We cannot tell them how to go about doing it, that we don't really have a system that allows for a statewide takeover of that system to tell everybody what to do. I think they're giving recommendations, and I hope that those recommendations follow with liability protections, because I think that's an important thing throughout this whole process. We also put in some things at the end because they came in late with cities and whatever about timelines, and also with the court system about timelines. So they will continue to go, and I would encourage people to go online to OLS and look up the final recommendations, because there's a letter there that tells all of this. And this has been a great conversation. It's good to see the things that are happening in Yamhill County and the engagement of all the people. So again, anything that you think would be helpful, my staff and I work constantly to keep up with all of the emails and other kinds of stuff, but we're open to having those conversations, and anybody that wants to be on our pass along our newsletters to as many people as you want. We think that's important, and thanks for the opportunity today.
And
I have a question.
Gioia has a question.
Yes, Senator, I have a question. Is there any discussion on postponing the cat tax for the first quarter? I don't know if that's been discussed. I don't know if you mentioned it, but some of my businesses asked me about that. Thank you.
We had, our committee had a huge conversation on this one. This was one of the biggest conversations we had. Most of the people, I mean, I can't speak for it. We know that the Revenue Department has the authority to do that, along with the governor. We have to figure out what we're doing. The conversation in our committee went on actually to the fact that we really don't want to give Amazon a buy on this one. It's the first time we've had outside corporations having to pay a tax to the state of Oregon to help us come out of this and to make this work in the future. Everybody agreed those companies that are doing really well during this time should not get that. So how do we go about organizing it in such a way that those companies that need the cash flow can take advantage of it and others not? We haven't come out. I don't think personally that if the Revenue Department decided to put fines and fees on afterwards, it would be a difficult task for them. But we did not come up with the exact recommendation. We said we need to continue to figure out what more more do we need to know about this, and how do we make it go forward? It's one of those things that we have a whole bunch of people talking to us about. Please don't take it away from us. With respect to schools who saw something for the first time where they're going to have resources, I warn them there's not much money being made in Oregon, so don't expect that the amount that they predicted is going to come forward anyway. So the conversation is ongoing, and if you read our recommendation, you'll see all the conversations that we had around it. But we did not end up recommending that it be done. We did encourage the governor and others to think about it because we knew they had the authority to do it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that response. Thank you.
Yeah,
yep.
Thank you very much. Any last questions or thoughts? Okay, I just want to, again, to the public, everybody who's arrayed here is working on your behalf, whether it's in the education world or the business response, the public health response, and they're here for you, and they're here to help you and to help you navigate the system, as Representative Post spoke about so eloquently. So reach out to them, and we're here to help you to get through this. So thank you, everybody, very much, and we'll talk to you on Friday.